It does so in Canada through an equalization scheme, where if one province doesn't have enough, then there's a transfer to top it up so that it is enough. So we need to be looking at that as well. So we need to be looking at this like any government does, and I think that it's important to realize that just in terms of the policies that they have in place, that it's far from respecting us as every other Canadian public member is, just in terms of essential services. Given what we've accomplished in the law, this goes to your first question about what if a community doesn't have enough money to bring a court case forward. I don't think that we need to be bringing comprehensive cases forward anytime now. My belief is that we've accomplished enough in the law to help us step up and move forward. If we're not in a position to deal with what we've got now, what are we going to do with more? My opinion is we've accomplished enough right now to be able to deal with some of the questions that are being asked. You know, so that we can provide for a proper education for all of our children who wish to go forward, instead of putting them through well, I don't like your family, so you're not going to go. You know how that is. We all do it. You can't have a house because I remember you caused me a problem. You know, it's like everything, there's never enough. And then we got this political culture of the Indian Act, which causes us no end of trouble. Well, we don't have to be doing that. I mean, we have the ability right now, in terms of the economic component, to effectively address those issues to our satisfaction without having to beg to anybody. You know, so what I'm saying is that we've got to get organized around what we've already got. And the fact of the matter is, the way the law is set out, when I was talking about getting that, your legal strategy, your political strategy, knowing what you want, knowing what they're doing, the process that's used there is judicial review, which is very different than bringing a regular court case forward. And what judicial review means is when you've done your research, you know what they're doing on your territories, you've got your evidence there in terms of the fact that they're yours, and then you have this paper trail between yourself and government to show that they haven't talked to you. And so you pick your best case and you challenge. You first of all go to the province and you say, listen, we've noticed that you're infringing upon our right here, and with respect, we'd like you to talk to us about it. And we noticed that you haven't been. Okay? And we want to be accommodated, and we noticed that we haven't been. So what you do is you challenge through judicial review. You go into the court and you say to the court, we want you to review this situation to determine whether or not we've been properly consulted with and accommodated, right? And so what the law says is when we challenge, the first thing that we've got to do is to show to the court a prima facie case that we can prove title if we had to, right? And I look at your situation with the peace and friendship treaties. I don't know if I said this earlier on, but I was at a meeting in Halifax where they were releasing this documentary about treaties to educate the Canadian public. And one of the speakers there was Tom Malloy, who's a chief federal negotiator. Wherever I see him, I get nervous. Anyway, he was up there making a speech, and he said, everybody knows that the peace and friendship treaties did not extinguish the title to the land. And I sat there listening to him, and I thought to myself, man, wow, that's everything you need to move forward. Because the fact that you've got peace and friendship treaties in place de facto means that you can prove title. Otherwise, why would they treat with you? So the threshold to show a prima facie case is very low. It's not a big deal. But you have to be prepared. And all prima facie means, it's a term of art, legal term of art, is that at the first instance, at the first glance. It's just a word. So anyway, what you do is you show a prima facie case. The court looks at it and they say, okay, Wendell, you satisfy the test. Now the inquiry starts. This is the review. The court looks at what the province is trying to do. They look at the guidance that the court has given across the country. They look at other examples. And then they'll determine whether or not the province has properly consulted with you and properly accommodated you. And if they haven't, then the court will order it to happen, proper consultation to occur. If consultation is occurring and it's not being done in good faith, the court has slapped the hand of the Crown in several decisions across the country. In fact, the court has said this: the Crown just can't run cavalierly roughshod over the rights of First Nations people. Right? So when you're taking a judicial review like this, even if you fail to show a prima facie case, it doesn't mean you've extinguished your right in the land. It just means that you weren't properly prepared. And you can go back and do it again. And the average cost for a judicial review is around 60 grand, $60,000. But my take on it is that if you're effectively organized, like we point out in this strategy, and the Crown knows that you are, they don't want to take you to court. Look at British Columbia. Why do you think they're talking about recognition legislation? It's because every time Premier Campbell's government has forced us into the courts with them, they've lost. It isn't because he woke up one morning and said, oh, poor Indians, I think I'm going to change my mind and be good to them now. We forced them. Simple as that. So it's there to do, and it's not a... I think we don't need to be thinking about a major comprehensive action anymore. Now we've got to be strategic and organized. And then with respect to this body that you're talking about, the province is going to do what it does. Canada is going to do what it does according to their strategy. And it shouldn't surprise us what they do. What that should tell us is that we need to start getting organized too. That's the simple answer to that one. Any other?
Yeah, I have one from online. It's Trina Metallic from Listigage. She says, how vital is language and culture to the pillar process?
Where does that come from?
Trina Metallic, she's from Listigage, and she's watching you on the weblog TV.
Oh, okay. That's a really important question because it goes to who we are as a people. What defines you and I as people? Right? It's our language, It's our history, it's our spirituality, it's our homeland, and the culture and tradition that goes along with it, right? That defines who you are as a person, and it defines who I am as a person, and it sets us apart as nations, right? So language and culture become, I think they're one of the biggest challenges that we have just as people, to survive as people. Never mind all this other stuff. It's just to be able to teach our children to continue to be Mi'kmaq in all its glory. And if we don't have our language, then we can't tell them about our history or about our lands or our spirituality. You know, we miss out on a lot. So in terms of the pillars, language and culture and tradition, I think it's the cloak that covers everything. You know, we can't separate it out from anything. It's got to be a part of everything.
Very good. Brian?
Troy wants me to be brief, but I enjoy giving Troy a hard time, so I'm going to take advantage of this. I'm also a recovering politician, so he knows that. But anyway, I went to CA once and realized it wasn't Counselors Anonymous. But anyway, there was a question that was asked a while ago, and you mentioned a lot of things, and it was inspired by your comment about the helicopter and the two fellows running into the bush and hiding. With all the Supreme Court wins and rulings in favor of First Nations in hunting and resources and territory, why do we continue to be charged under their legislation? And this question was inspired because it's happening today in this community, I guess. So why is this still continuing?
The guy who picked me up last night at Bathurst, Fletcher, Jerome, that was, as soon as I got into the car and before I even got settled in with the seat belt, he says, I read your bio and I know what you've done and what you do. I got a question for you. That's the question he asked me. If we've got all this, then why are our people still being charged? I think clearly the experience across the country shows us time and time again that if we aren't organized around these principles that I've outlined for you, they'll continue to treat you the way they've always have. Right? And if we're organized to that degree, when we're going out there and decide how we're going to deal with moose, for example, not only when we're going to hunt them, how many we're going to take, and how we're going to deal with it, if we have that agreement amongst our people of our nation, and we're organized every other which way, in terms of a political strategy, it makes sense to me that we can engage the Crown. I mentioned earlier on about Justice Ian Binney speaking at the University of Alberta. And he started his comments by responding to a column in the Globe and Mail that was written by Gordon Gibson, who happens to be from British Columbia, who used to be a Liberal MP. He's actually parliamentary secretary to Pierre Elliott Trudeau. And he wrote in this article that the Supreme Court of Canada has given Indians too much. And where do they get off on being social activists? And where's the legitimacy? Ian Binney responded by saying, Gordon Gibson and the rest of the Canadian public have got to understand that we're in a new era as far as Crown and Aboriginal relations are concerned. We're not given First Nations anything more than they already had.